National Security Advisor John Bolton. And before we went to the break, sir, I mentioned the culture that we all know is Chinese, and that is the IP theft. I mean, I've got a list of companies here who've sued Huawei and ZTE for stealing trade secrets and then settled lawsuits with them, including Cisco and Motorola and T-Mobile, Microsoft, etc. How do you move the needle on that?
Well, you know, if I were back at the American Enterprise Institute and a Fox News contributor, I could discuss that at length. I'll just say this. I think President Trump has identified exactly the structural issues that you referred to, the enormous damage that's been done to the United States over a period of decades by Chinese stealing intellectual property and forced technology transfers. This is critical to reversing the pattern to get this right in the negotiations. So I don't think it should be surprising that it's complex and that China's faced with some very difficult choices here. That's what our negotiators have been pursuing, and that's really much of the work that remains to be done. Not only how to reach agreement on these issues, but how to enforce them over the long term. Well,
this is the key, and this is what's been talked about most recently, some kind of action that the U.S. government can come up with in terms of enforcement, and enforcement action should the Chinese turn around and not keep their promises, which, of course, we know they've done in the past many times. What is the enforcement action that could be possible here to make sure that Beijing follows up with these promises?
Well, I don't want to steal Bob Lighthizer thunder on this. I mean, they are in the middle of the negotiations now. There are going to be more talks next week. Certainly, at the highest levels of the government, we're working as hard as we can to pursue the president's agenda here.
Would you put tariffs back in place if they fail to comply?
That would be Sure, that would be a possibility. That's one way of doing it. That's one of the options that's out there. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, look, I'm a free trader, but one of the reasons the president, I think, was right in imposing tariffs on China was that it got their attention. And I think that's been all to the good.
But I want to zero in on the national security issues because you're really going to give us some important color on this. And we know that this is not just economic warfare. This is also military aggressions. They are, setting up islands in the South China Sea. They're putting military bases on those islands. They are putting military bases across the world, right on the borders and the ports, as far as Djibouti, according to the former head of the Intel Committee, Devin Nunes, who's been on this program many times. Can you talk about the military aggressions and if there's anything the U.S. can do to stop that?
Look, the way to handle China for the United States, I think, is the existential security question of the 21st century. It's identified as such in the president's national security strategy. It's been a focus of much of the preparation of the budget requests that will be announced here shortly. We're looking exactly at things like what China's doing in the South China Sea, contrary to every pledge it's made before to engage in peaceful negotiation to resolve territorial claims. It is taking over these rocks and shoals and islands, building military bases on them. It's completely unacceptable. It's why we continue to do freedom of navigation exercises and look at other ways to stop this effort, in effect, to create a new Chinese province. People may say, but the South China Sea is so far away. It's twice as big as the Mediterranean Sea. And between 40 and 50% of the world's shipborne commerce goes through the South China Sea. So if they change it to Chinese territorial waters, it's a huge shift for Southeast and East Asia.
Well, on the economic warfare, it's not just the obvious forced transfer of technology when Beijing spends a lot of their money to acquire an energy company, to acquire a financial services company, a technology company in the U.S. It's also about academia. Can the U.S. do anything about that? We've talked a great deal on this program about Confucius centers, these Confucius institutes, which call themselves think tank, not nonprofits, but in fact can act as another center that is sucking up U.S. intelligence. How worried are you about these?
Very worried. This is an effort by China to influence opinion in America that makes the election hacking we've been talking about by Russia look as one senior U.S. official intelligence called it the JV effort. What China's doing, what Vice President Pence explained some months back in a very important speech about these efforts, really is far greater in magnitude than any other foreign effort we've seen in history to influence American opinion. And it's not just confined to the United States. They're doing it in Australia, other countries, close friends of ours. So this really goes to the core of how you maintain a free and open society in this country when other countries are trying to influence it the way that China has. It goes well beyond just election hacking, although we certainly have been concerned about China doing that as well.
John, can you give us an update on Syria? I want to switch gears here because I want to get as much in as possible with you this morning. On the heels of this Journal story Friday, the U.S. is still hunting for allied cooperation in Syria. The administration did not secure commitments from key European allies to send military forces to Syria, passing the target set for Friday. Where are we?
Well, I think the Journal may be a little bit behind the curve on that. I can tell you I've spoken to my British and French counterparts this past week. I think they are looking to try and participate. We haven't formalized it yet. A lot of work remains to be done. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Joe Dunford, and his colleagues at the Pentagon have been really moving heaven and earth to try and get this accomplished. We're still optimistic we can do it, so it may have taken a little bit longer time, but it's still moving in the right direction. We think it's very important that we get this right.
Well, the president would like our allies to pay up in terms of the U.S. troops on the ground. Have you gotten any response from the president's proposals?
Well, we're doing a lot, as you know, in NATO to get the allies to increase their spending to meet the commitment they themselves made in Wales in 2014 to get to 2% of gross national product by 2024. And that wasn't an accidental decision at Wales in 2014. It was after the Russians moved into eastern Ukraine and our friends in Europe began to realize that the history had not actually ended. It was still going on, and they were living on a continent with a real threat. This is also true in terms of base rentals and other costs that the president has looked at. I think he's following through on many of the things Barack Obama said. He's just being more effective.
All right, we will leave it there. John Bolton, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.